If you're creating a statically generated site hosted in Azure, then the API for that site has to be built using Azure Functions. But equally, if you've made the decision to create a serverless API for your application and you've chosen Azure Functions, then let's go check out how we can create an Azure Functions API. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whenever it is I find you, and welcome along. So today we are going to build an Azure Function API. So to get started, we need to look at some prerequisites. So as you can see, we need a .NET SDK installed, so .NET 6 at the time of this video is the latest. We need the Azure Functions core tools, Visual Studio Code, the C# extension for Visual Studio Code, and the Azure Functions extension for Visual Studio Code. So I've got all of these installed on this machine. So just to show the point, I've got the Azure Functions core tools version 4 installed, and somewhere down here I've got the .NET SDK version 6. I've also got version 5 on this machine, but certainly version 6 is what we need. So I've got those installed, and I've also got Visual Studio installed. And inside Visual Studio, I've got the Azure plugin extension, which has the Azure Functions part to it. And I've also got inside my extensions, there's the Azure Functions aspect. I've got the C# extension, which you can also download and install, which you're going to need to create a C# API. With that all in place, we can go over to our project. So I've got my static website project here, but it can be any project you need. And I'm going to create a new API folder in here where I'm going to store it. And I'm going to create a new Visual Studio Code. Get rid of that. Drop that over into Visual Studio Code. So I open that one up, and now I can close this one out and open this one instead. So I've now just opened Visual Studio Code in that API folder with nothing presently in it. So let's go and create our API. So we can come over to the Azure Functions extension, and there is an option in here of create function. So let's go and create a function, and it says that the current folder is not a project, so create a new project. So yes, let's go and do that. And we want a C# API. Obviously there's other languages available, but let's not worry about that. And okay, so what is this choice all about here? So .NET or .NET Isolated? Let's go and have a look and see what we can find out about that. So there's this information here which shows the roadmap for Azure Functions, and as of today, we've always used in process with Azure Functions. So as you can see, for .NET Core 3.1 up to .NET 6, there is this option of in process. But with the advent of .NET 5, they've started with the isolated process approach. And as you can see, by the time we get to .NET 7, there is only going to be the isolated approach. So realistically, we want to try and get on board with the isolated approach as quickly as possible. So that's what we are going to opt for. But just to look at some of the benefits, if you're still deliberating over whether you should or shouldn't use out of process, this page gives you some of the benefits, and I'll put links to these pages in the description. But it basically runs the Azure function as a separate process away from the core Azure function hosted process. So your application actually runs as a separate executable. And as such, what I think is the biggest benefit is we get the benefit of dependency injection. Now we can start using in our Azure Function applications. With all that done, let's jump back over and let's select isolated, because that's what we want. We want to create an HTTP trigger because this is obviously a web API, and I'm going to go with the defaults for now, and I'm going to accept anonymous, so I'm going to allow everyone into my API for now. And with that done, when this wizard finishes, we can see that we have a new class called HTTP trigger 1 with an HTTP trigger 1 function. And if you've used Azure Functions before, you'll see that there's some slight differences here. So we've got a program.cs that actually creates our builder. So much like we're used to with other .NET APIs and programs, we can now start to use dependency injection at this level so that we can inject things into our methods over here. But for now, for the purposes of this, I'm just going to go and build this. So that's built. So now I can come over to the debug and attach that. And what we should see is this runs up and gives us a URL where the function is actually available on. And there's our URL where we can actually reach the function. I've got the Thunder client extension installed just to test this. So I can come over to Thunder client, paste that in there and send in a GET request. And I get back the welcome to Azure Functions. Just going back over and looking at the code, we can verify that that is what we would expect. So it works on both a GET and a POST request. And we get back the string, welcome to Azure Functions. So equally, if I send it as a POST request, I get that. But if I send it as some other type of verb, then I get a 404. So that shows it's all working. And as we'd expect with C# code, we can obviously drop some breakpoints into these things so that when we fire that request in, we get a nice breakpoint and we can start looking at some of this information that we're getting. So we can go and interrogate the request and see the data that's actually come in, so the headers, the body, if it's a POST request, etc. So we get a nice experience inside Visual Studio Code. So that pretty much is our API created inside our API folder. And with that, we're good to go and start fleshing out what we actually do with our API. That's it for this video. If you found this useful, then please like and subscribe to the channel. It does help me out, so that'll be lovely if you could do that. And I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.